Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Liz Myska. And today I have the distinct pleasure of having my colleague, Jack Peacock, join me to tell us about his new venture, Audio Radio. Welcome, Jack.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here. Usually I'm sitting over there behind the camera.
Absolutely.
So it's a little bit strange to be on this side of the camera. Audio Radio. It's I as the body part, Audio Radio. And it basically is an idea that I came up with almost 18 years ago, where we wanted to have traditional radio plus described visual elements for the blind plus captioned radio for the deaf, all in one streaming service, so all on one browser.
Yes.
And finally, the technology is catching up to me, so we're moving forward with that.
What was the instigation? Why did you come up with this idea?
Why did I come up with the idea? Because I had too much time on my hands, probably. The whole technology company started almost a little more than 22 years ago now, sitting in a noisy sports bar, which I often refer to as my office. And guys behind me were talking about the Fox Theater in Atlanta, which is pretty famous. It's like the Hanover Theater here. And I love the theater, but I don't ever get a chance to go because I'm usually too busy. And I'm sitting in the restaurant and working on a problem for one of my clients. And the guys behind me start talking about the Fox, and I start leaning backwards to try to listen in on what they're talking about, and realize I couldn't hear them because of the noise. Sat back up over my table and said, geez, I must be going deaf. And suddenly it hit me. People who are deaf can't enjoy all these different venues because the audible information is not made available to them in captions. And then immediately the same thing for visual information is not available for people who are blind. And that was the beginning of what's been a fun 22 plus year run so far. And basically I came up with a rough idea of how to build these accommodations so that people who are blind or deaf or who have other cognitive disorders that preclude effective communication, how to bring about the changes needed, finding these challenges, looking for the solutions and the opportunities, and trying to make it all happen. And iAudio Radio was one of those ideas that I had when I was working on. We started with movie theaters to begin with because they were being sued for not providing captions. So we actually the first 2 or 3 years that I started all this, I was just doing R&D, anything and everything about the industry or what would be a new industry, I think, at that time, because nobody was really doing a lot of this type of work for commercial applications.
And by R&D, you mean research and development?
Research and development, yes. Real and dangerous would be another change. Probably more apropos for what I was doing at the time. So the movie theater application was the first one we did. We stopped that because the movie theaters basically at the time weren't really interested in putting in any kind of a solution, and certainly not mine, because mine was more expensive than they wanted to spend money on. They did eventually settle down with a company out of Hollywood, California, where they were going to do a pager device with one line of captioning scrolling through it. Not my cup of tea, is not what we offered. We were going to do both the captions, American Sign Language, and described audio for the first run films that were coming out. So the movie theater thing didn't work out, but we took that same concept, we changed it a little bit, and we made a note-taking system out of it, which was actually fairly successful. My surrogate son, who has Asperger's, used it in high school, and it raised his grades 2 letters, because as an Asperger's student, he couldn't learn by listening to the information from the teacher. He had to read it. So we created a speech-to-text engine, used a speech-to-text engine, and created a system with a chat feature for people who are deaf so that they could participate in the class. And John used it, I think, the second half of his senior year in high school, and raised his grades 2 letters, so it worked out well. But eventually these different types of innovations or interventions came up with looking at radio, basically, because it was an uncharted opportunity for us to try to do something for people who, essentially, to start with, it was people who are deaf. But then we looked at the other information that you could add to radio. So if we're doing news, weather, and sports, and we have an item that might incorporate a video, for example, we want to make sure that that video is described for people who are blind. Because even if you're listening to the radio and you don't see the visual, if we happen to show the visual for anybody else, we want to make sure that's described. So basically put this whole package together where we're going to try to do all 3 features in one streaming system.
So just to back you up a little bit, so I guess the notion for people who are not differently abled, who have their eyesight or have their hearing, I don't think and I'm speaking personally, that there's a realization that when you go to a venue, when you go to a sporting event, or you go to a theater, or you go to a museum, so these are visual arts, but they may also, when you go to a concert, it may be auditory, that certain people, just by their predicament, just by their lack of that sense, are excluded. And you have, in your entrepreneurial brain, you have invented a solution for people to become included. What is it like to introduce someone to something that they previously had before, say in my case, my sight, or in the case of somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing, their hearing, and have them realize that they can be included?
So one of the first things we did, in fact, our very first sale was that note-taking system that I mentioned earlier. Funny story with that, I was out at Cal State Northridge, where they do an annual conference on disabilities, and I was displaying the movie theater product, sort of like a Reader's Digest version of the demo. So we didn't do a whole full-blown thing. And we had set up basically an exhibit on part of a table. So we were sharing a table with one of the vendors. And we did that show several years in a row. But the first time I was out there, we did the show. I came back to Atlanta, where I was at the time, and spent the next 2 weeks getting prepared to do a show up in Niagara Falls, Canada, for the movie theater industry. And we'll skip that part of the story because it was funny but not fun at that time. They scheduled us for the exhibit hall up there, and then never showed up. They had nobody attending come to the exhibit hall. For the 3 days that we were supposed to be there, I think it ended up being just one afternoon that the folks showed up. So anyways, we're there in the morning that day, and I get a phone call, and it's a lady from the state of California who works in the voc rehab area. And she asked me about the movie theater product that I had. She apologized she couldn't get down to see me. She was teaching a class, but had heard about it and wanted to know some more information. I gave her that information, and when I got done, she said, well, will it do A, B, and C? And I said, sure, we can do A, B, and C. She goes, okay, great, I'll call you back. So she hung up, and I looked at my marketing guy I brought with me from Cleveland, Ohio, up to Niagara Falls, and explained to Hilton what was going on, and he laughed. About an hour and a half or so later, she called back and wanted to know if the product could do X, Y, and Z. And I said, yeah, we can do X, Y, and Z. Sure. Great, let me call you right back. So again, I tell Hilton what's going on. We both thought it was odd that this lady calling me out of the blue looking for adaptations basically to this product so that we could do something else. So about 15 minutes later, she called back and she said, okay, I'll take one. And of course, I'm sitting there looking at my marketing guy going, okay.
It doesn't exist.
I basically sold vaporware, yeah. So I got off the phone with her, and without telling Hilton what had just transpired, I said, watch this. I called my software engineer back in Atlanta, the most brilliant guy I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. This guy is just fantastic. So I called him up in Atlanta, and I said, hey, how you doing? He goes, good. And I said, guess what? We sold one. He's like, really? A movie theater? I'm like, oh, no, not a movie theater. He goes, what did you do? So I told him we had this new client out in California who was a voc rehab lady, and she has a client who's deaf who was going to lose her job if she couldn't participate in meetings, office meetings. And I now had to explain to the software engineer how he was going to have to take the movie theater application, change the input so that we use speech-to-text technology as the driving engine for it, and then wrap it up in a nice user interface. And let's just say that phone call didn't go really well because John, my engineer, was surprised that I would do that. I'm still surprised that I did that too. But you know what? In 8 weeks, he finished the product. I flew it out to Northern California where this lady's client was. I brought 2 sets of the product. So I brought one set for the client, opened it up, set it all up, got it running, did the demo for her, and her husband was there. And by the time I got done with the demo, she was just beaming. Her smile was just terrific. And I said, that right there, that's why we're doing what we're doing. So we saved her job. So she got to take it all home. And then I turned around and gave the other box to this voc rehab lady from the state. And she couldn't figure out why. And I'm like, you just bought something sight unseen, something that didn't even exist at the time. And she didn't know that at the time. So she was thrilled too. But so again, it's the reward is basically knowing that you've set out to do and have accomplished that major goal, and made somebody's life better. It's not just quality of life. Sometimes is all it takes. And our mission really is about providing these solutions for people, whether it's education, employment, or in our case, we like to do also the entertainment areas that include a piece of education. So we're trying to do all that, and it's fun to find those challenges and then come up with these ideas that sometimes keep me up at night.
Well, it's I, meaning the letter I, but the body part I is for idea and ingenuity and innovation. So with iAudio Radio, and pardon me for saying that, what is your vision for iAudio Radio? and what was the catalyst? What was the catalyst this, currently?
The current transformations, I guess.
Right.
So we had, like I said, almost 18 years ago, I came up with the idea, and I described, what we were going to end up doing. The business plan for this was to set up a station, streaming station, 24/7, with content that was homegrown and had either a general interest or maybe a specific interest to people who are differently abled. So whether they're blind, deaf, or have other cognitive disorders. And once we got up 24/7, then we would go out and start looking for different events that we might be able to do, because part of the deal is to have these features available for not only canned programming, which is kind of what we're doing today. We'll film it today, but it'll air later, and then it'll be in the video on demand section here at WCCA TV. So the same idea with iAudio Radio, we would have those general interest programs built, the homegrown programming, and then air them just like you might see on a regular TV or radio station, and then go out and do the live event but the live events have to be live. We have to be able to do the auto description on the fly. We have to be able to do the regular play-by-play, if you will, and then caption that for the deaf all at the same time. And the captioning is the part we're still working on, but we think we're real close to that. So we got, our original business plan was to go canned programming first and then add the events. Well, as you know, because we've worked together on this thing for a long time, we started with the WCCA back when they were opening the season this year. And we're fortunate enough to have them allow us to come in and do some training with their staff to teach them how to be sighted guides and how to basically interact with people who are differently abled. And without exception, everyone in that organization, from top to bottom, they get it. They understand what's required, and what they want to do is to make everyone feel comfortable going to the ballpark, seeing a game, and taking part in all the other interactions at Polar Park. So we were fortunate to be able to do that for those folks. And as soon as we got in there, we were, being asked questions about the facility and the content and things. And as you know, we noticed one of the challenges was not having some of the information available to those who need it. In particular, audible information for the deaf, visual information for the blind. So we got to, I'm sorry?
Other way around, but.
Other way around. Did I say it the other way? Yeah.
It's okay.
Still working on.
You're still in R&D.
Yeah, I'm still in R&D. Still innovating here. So so we ended up having an opportunity to pitch the idea to the WCCA brass.
Literally pitch.
And literally pitch. That was a word I chose intentionally. To have us go in and do audio described play-by-play for the WCCA game, the home game.
And I'm just gonna interrupt you. So
that's never happened before.
What's the difference between when you say audio description? So what do? You say, well, we're here at the ballpark. So how is that helpful to somebody who is blind?
It's always better to start with, we're here at the ballpark if we're describing the game at the ballpark. Otherwise, they're trying to figure out how I did it, and I don't want to go there. So what is audio description for a baseball game anyway? Right. If you think about the traditional radio broadcasts for sports, a lot of it is really just visual. Even if you're on the radio, you've got this mindset that the visual aspect isn't as important on the radio, so that you're not using all the words that you should be using for people who are blind. And I know that the commercial guys have been taught, the communication majors, they've been taught when you're doing play-by-play, you always want to speak as if somebody next to you is blind. The challenge there, though, is you don't want to be telling the person who's blind what's going on. You want to use the correct wording, alliteration, similes, those types of tricks to have the blind person painting a picture in their mind of what we're seeing. So the object is to make the visual verbal, and then the correct accommodations then would be, how do we do it so that when I get done describing something, you know exactly what we were seeing. And the example I like to try to use for baseball, at least, is you might hear a commentator say that's a hit up the middle. For me, that means a lot of different things. So how do I narrow it down to what actually took place on the field? And for me, for example, I might say a hard grounder just past the pitcher's feet to his left. It skips past the mound, it bounces past second base. The second baseman diving to try to catch the ball, but it just misses his outstretched glove and rolls into center field. That's a single for Josh Ockamy. Credits to Ben for doing that one.
And that's exactly the kind of detail that someone who's blind, for instance, someone like me who was once sighted and loved baseball and knew the names of all the players and what positions they played of the Boston Red Sox yearned for and felt deprived of without audio description. So you with iAudio Radio have filled a void that I don't know that I was even aware of until I attended a game and was completely bereft of any orientation other than knowing I was at the ballpark. Because the things that I couldn't see the pitcher and the batter. I could tell when the batter hit the ball because I could hear the crack of the bat, but I had no idea what direction. I was listening to the roar of the crowd, but the crowd is fickle as well, and they may be looking, and then it's like, oh, so it's like, okay, so it's not hit out of here.
So, and that's actually one of the other things that we try to do. So we have a different business model than do the commercial stations, so that they're there obviously to make a profit. They have to pay their employees, their shareholders and things. So I understand, the financial side of the game is different for them than it is for us. We're setting up as a nonprofit organization, and currently we're not running any advertisements, although we can't do that. We can't have a call to action. But we noticed when we started putting this all together that there's so much going on in the stands that if you're there at the game and you're blind and you hear reactions from the crowd, your first question is, what just happened? So we don't do commercial breaks per se. When we're doing the game, we basically are on from the moment we start the pregame until we sign off after the game is ended, because it's those situations where they're doing a wave, and until they get to you, you may not know that people are standing up and throwing their arms up in the air. Some of the on-field entertainment in between innings. The Woo Sox are great with all of this stuff. I mean, they will keep anybody entertained forever with different entertainment things they've got going on. One of them is they have sweep the bases. So they have a couple little kids going back and forth between some plastic bases they put down on the left field line. And they'll dust the bases, and they'll run to the next one, dust those bases, and they'll go back and forth, I think, twice maybe. And the idea is the first kid who does, 3 sweeps on a base and then goes back and forth those 4 times, the first one who finishes wins. And of course, Jim and I, my broadcast partner and I, always kid that, it's always a tie. It doesn't matter who does what, it's always a tie, which is great for the kids. And so when we see those kinds of on-field entertainment or even in the stands, if there's reaction going on, we want to be able to fill that gap. So if you don't know what's going on, that's our job to tell you.
Right. Well, you're as a visually impaired person, you feel left out. You feel left out, which is different from fear of missing out because you don't know what's going on. And the point that you made earlier about being sparing with words, people see with, they gobble things up with their eyes. And a person like myself can't gobble anything up with my eyes. So I'm waiting for the feast to begin. I am waiting for the shower of words to happen so that I can be included and oriented to what's going on. And that's why iAudio Radio is such a treat for me, whether I'm in the ballpark listening or whether I'm at home, because now I can follow along, and I have, a picture, as you said earlier, I have a picture in my mind of what's happening. And when you say the people are fouling the ball off, I know what's going on. So I'm giddy with the potential for not only me personally, but for those, and all of us are in this category, those of us who are aging, and as we age, we will lose that proclivity of and that acuteness of sight and sound.
Mhm.
And this is a medium, what iAudio radio is, to keep us part of the group.
And we do it not just only for the blind, obviously. As soon as we get the captioning up, we'll have the same accommodation for the deaf for those items that are audible, even though I said visual earlier. So the challenge is, how do we make it enjoyable for everybody? How do we bring those pieces of content to everyone that needs it in the medium that works for them? So whether it's the Woo Sox and the home games that we did, and we had a blast doing those. We did the 2 playoff games for the Pirates, the 2 playoff games that were here at the DCU, which they won, of course, because we helped them out. And then they went to Phoenix and won the championship the week after that.
And that's the indoor football
That's
league.
indoor football league, right? And hopefully we'll have another sport coming up here soon that we can add to our list. But in our case, we flipped our business plan upside down because we're doing the events first, and now we're quickly trying to build the 24/7 programming. So hopefully by the time this airs, we'll have 24/7 up, and then we'll have more of a chance to identify what our events are coming on and when, instead of guessing about when we're on the air, we'll be on all the time. So that's the ultimate goal.
So if anyone in the audience has ideas for programming,
Mm-hmm.
should they? How can they get in touch with you, Jack?
Let's see. The easiest way right now would be to send us a tweet at iAudio Radio, and that's EYE Audio Radio. We have LinkedIn and Twitter links on the webpage, iaudioradio.org. Probably the easiest ways right now, and then we'll have other methods. We're going to put a contact form up on the website as soon as we get the other technical issues for the website and for the audio pieces done. We're fixing up the server so we can have more reliable service for everybody. So there's a lot of work to do and a lot of fun getting it done.
Well, I would say, audience, jump on the bandwagon, come along. This is something that it's a seedling, and it's growing, and it's going to blossom here in Worcester and then be exported. And
let us know what kind of program you'd like us to do. I have a long list of things that we've already got planned and somewhat in the works, but we're always willing to listen to something new, and hopefully we can get it done for you.
Well, thank you, Jack, for being my
Thank
guest
you.
today, and I will have you back at a future date so we can hear about the progress of iAudio Radio.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And join me next time for another edition of Connecting the Dots.
Please note that the information provided in this show is not a substitute for consulting with an experienced local attorney and receiving counsel based on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction. To contact Lizbeth, email her at lisbeth@elizabethlmyska.com or call her office at 508-753-7681. We're online at connectingthedots.lawyer. Executive producers, Lizbeth Myska and Jack Peacock. Producers, John Medberry and Bill Hamilton. A production of Elizabeth L. Myska, JD, LLM, in association with Compliments.